So to make sure that all of those are found, what we want to do is we want to first check for the length. So we'll say strlen, and that will get the length of whatever string we put inside of here. In this case, our get email. So we want to say if the length of email is greater than 5, and actually I'm going to go with 7, is greater than or equal to 7. So obviously that must be true. So then to make it so we can check for other options, I guess, to make sure that other options are true, we want to put in 2 and signs after it. And notice that I'm putting each of these options in parentheses, and then there's the global parentheses for our if statement itself. So we're going to have 2 more of these. So inside of this one, we want to use the str function that is built into PHP. And what the str function does is it takes 2 parameters. We have the first parameter, which is the string you want to search for. And I believe on the PHP website, php.net, the actual, I guess, metaphor that they use is a needle and haystack. So our string that we want to search through would be our haystack, and then what we want to search for would be our needle, which is our second parameter. So we want to search through our get email, and then we want to search for the @ symbol, because all emails must have an @ symbol in it. So we can go ahead and just copy that and paste it inside of our next one here. And inside of here, we need to check for a period. So all 3 of these options must be met, or else it's not a valid email address. And there are ways of doing more advanced valid email validation detection, I guess. I guess that's the best way to word it. But there are other ways of doing that, but this is just pretty simple for now. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we need to connect to our database and make sure that our username isn't already in the database. And then we need to make sure that the email isn't already in the database, and then we can pretty much just register the user, add all their information in the database, and then have at it. So we're going to require, and that's going to be our connect file, and then after that we're going to have our MySQL close function to disconnect us from the database. Now, according to my file system setup, if we go to my folder here, we have my connect file that's in the same directory as the register file. So I'm just going to put /connect.php. So that will connect to my database, and obviously you want to put that relative to the location of your register file. Alright, so what we need to first do is we need to run a MySQL query. And the point of our query is to make sure that the username is not already in the database, because we don't want to have 2 people with the same username. That's bad. So we need to say select in all caps, and then asterisk from in all caps, and then our database table. In this case, it's users. And then we want to say where in all caps, and then we want to say our username equals get user. So we want to select all from our users table where the username field right there is equal to our get user variable. And then we want to use the numRows function when we create a variable numRows. So we need to see MySQL _num_rows, and inside of here we just put our query. So we want to say if numRows equals 0. Now, numRows, the MySQL numRows function will return the total number of valid rows that are found from a MySQL query. So our query here will return 0 if the username is not in the database at all. And if it's in the database, it will return 1, or if it's in more than one time for some reason, it'll return more than 1. So we want to make sure it's equal to 0. Then we want to put in our else for our error message, and we will say there is already a user with that username. And and that's actually the wrong there. Alright, so, grammar is important. So after we have checked for the existence of our username, we need to make sure that the email address isn't a duplicate in the database. So we can just copy all of this, and then we will say there's already user with that email, and we want to select all from users where email equals get email. Yeah, it's spelled right. And we want this to be, our number is here, to be equal to 0 as well, and that is so everything is, it's not found in the database already. So, if the username and the email aren't found in the database, pretty much all there's left to do is actually register the user and send them their email activation code. So, what we need to do is we need to create some variables that we can then add to the database. So, our first one is going to be our date, and we're going to use the PHP date function, and I'm going to say f space d comma y. And that F needs to be capital. So we have capital F space lowercase d comma space capital Y. Now, in the date function, a capital F will give you the full month name, so January, February, October, whatever. They'll give you the full month name, and then D, a lowercase d, will give you the current date with leading zeros. So, or no, without leading zeros. Sorry. So it'll be 1, 2, 15, 30, whatever. And then the capital Y will give you the full year, so in this case 2011. And then, yeah. So the other fields we need are code that we need to generate, and then our active we will just set to 0. So to generate our code, what we're going to do is we need to essentially create a random number or anything, and then I'm just going to MD5 encrypt it, so it's random and it's pretty lengthy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the rand function in PHP, and that will just give us a random number. And then what we want to do is we want to MD5 encrypt this, so we need to put that inside of parentheses. So we want to MD5 encrypt a random value. So that'll give us our code. And that's just a pretty generic way of generating a very fast code for email activation or whatever. So the next thing we want to do is we just want to add the user to the database. So to add the user to the database, we need to run a MySQL query function, and we don't need to set it equal to a variable. I guess you can if you want, but it's kind of pointless. So we want to say insert into, and that's in all caps, and then our database table name, in this case users, and then we want to say values, and then parentheses. So inside of these parentheses here, and this is where we're going to put all of our values. Now you don't have to space this out like this. You can put everything on one line. As long as you have proper syntax within your parentheses here and within your entire query, you won't get any errors. So you can put every single item on a different line, and as long as you have proper syntax, it won't have PHP won't have a problem. So, according to our database, we have an ID, our username, password, email, active, code, and date. Oh, and actually, before we create or add the user, we need to create our password. Now, according to our login system, if I scroll down here, we're using this function. This is what I'm using. So you want to use this exact code right here to make sure you're generating the same type of password. And obviously, you want to have a random salt value there. And I did discuss the salt value and the purpose of it in the login part. So if you don't remember that, definitely read up on it and check out that video. So after we create our password, we need to add everything to the database. So first, we want to have our ID, which since it's an auto increment value in our database, we just want to leave it blank. And then we have a comma, and then we have whatever is our next value. In this case, will be our get user value. And then we have a comma after that, single bracket, or single quote, sorry. And then we have our password. and then we have our email, so get email. And then after that, we have, I believe, our active value. Yes. So our active value will be set to 0, so that by default the user is not activated. And then we have our code. And then last but not least, we have our date, so the date the user registered. Now, note that after each item here, we have a comma, and the space isn't required, it just makes it look nicer. But we have a comma. But after this very last one here, we don't have a comma. Make sure you don't have a comma after the last piece of information inside of our query here, or else you'll get errors. So you make sure you don't have that extra comma. So now that we've added the user to the database, we want to check our database to make sure that the user is actually in the database. So what we need to do is we need to create our query again. So MySQL underscore query. And inside of here, we want to say select all from users where username equals get user. And then we want to have our num rows. Oh, there's a T there. So num rows, and then inside of here we have our query. And then we have our if statements. And then we have our error MSG right there. So before we check to make sure that the username is not in the database, because we don't want duplicates. But after we've added the user to the database, we want to make sure that the user is there. So we want to say if num rows equals 1. So if the user's in the database, that's pretty much what it's saying. But if it's not, we'll say an error has occurred, your account was not created. Yeah, that works. Just a nice simple error message. Change it to whatever you like. So after we've actually made sure that the user has been added to the database, what we want to do is we want to send their email activation to their email, obviously. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to create some variables that you can easily change if you're downloading the source package for tutorials, or if you're getting the source package. You can easily change to configure it for your own website. Now, our webmail, sorry, that should be webmaster. Our webmaster is essentially your email, or the email that the activation email is going to be from. So in this case, I'm just going to say admin@nickfrosty.com. And then we want to create our headers. And inside of here, we have from :space. And be very careful that this is typed exactly. It must be a capital F, and then lowercase r, lowercase o, lowercase m, colon, and then space. And then we have the webmaster. Now, if you want, for the webmaster, you can make it show up as a name. So, say I want to say the message is from Nick Frosty, and the email is admin@nickfrosty.com. So, what you want to do is you want to put in wakas right there, or greater than, less than signs. You want to put those in right there, and that will make it show up that it's from whatever your name is. Alright, so then we want to create our subject variable, and I'm just going to say activate your account. And yeah, that works. And then we want to create our actual message variable. Now, our message variable is going to, obviously, it's going to contain our link, that you can click on the link and then go to the activation page. Obviously, that's a must. And whatever other text you want, maybe you want to thank your users for registering, or whatever. It's entirely up to you. Don't forget to check out my website, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube.